So when we talk about Form CP2000, here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So basically, here is how the form looks like. This is an example of a Form CP2000. So you have a clear idea what we're talking about. So when you have a Form CP2000, you usually have a proposed amount due. This is from the IRS, of course. You have the summary of the proposed changes. So the IRS sort of explains how they got the amount due to you, so you have a clear idea how they are talking, how they actually amounted, how they reached the correct amount. So usually you have the tax that you owe, the payments, and also the substantial tax understatement penalty, and also interest. So you always have interest and penalties. And I'm just showing you on the screen right now a simple CP2000 form. So basically, this form actually is kind of important because if you receive a CP2000 letter, it means that the IRS has noticed a difference between two things, and only two: your federal tax return and the income information the IRS has on file for you, as provided by your employer, your bank, and any other third parties via W-2s, 1090As, 1099s, and so on and so forth. So it's important to know that a CP2000 notice is no reason to panic. It's quite common to get one, and they don't always result in an increased bill. It's just a matter of the IRS telling you, hey, listen, we are noticing a delta between what you submitted to us and what we have on file for you. The worst thing you can do when you receive a CP2000 is to ignore it, which will almost certainly result in additional penalties and interest. You never want to ignore a CP2000. So the CP2000 kicks off a process called a correspondence audit, which usually ends in one of three ways. Number one, you agree with the information presented to you in the CP2000. So you want to contact the IRS, and then you want to proceed with the payments. That's option number one. Option number two, you disagree with the CP2000 and appeal it. And option number three, you are unsure about the information presented in the CP2000 and ask the IRS for more time to investigate. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. You are going to enjoy today's conversation. I want to explore a little further. When we talk about CP2000, it's really important to really understand that when you first get a CP2000, don't panic and read it carefully. You want to read it carefully. On the right-hand side of the letter, on the summary of proposed changes, you will see the following totals. I think I just showed you a little earlier. So you have the new proposed total tax amount, the payments you have made and the interest you owe, and the proposed amount due, which is your total taxes and interest due minus payments. And it's one of those things where the proper procedure here is for you to go back to your paperwork and have a clear idea what you have and compare what you have with what the IRS is saying they have on your behalf. Okay, you want to review all of your W-2s, 1090As, 1099s. You want to check all the records you have received from your employer, bank, clients, and any other resources, or even like resources in terms of tax documentation and any other sources also of income, to make sure the proposed changes are correct. Okay, and it's one of those things where you always have the option to review your tax returns. You always have the option to order a transcript directly from the IRS, or you can partner with a third party to kind of help you out. And so you are able to actually get the IRS transcripts, and you also can have a tally of any unpaid penalties or balances owed. The whole thing is, it's all about transparency. So once you do that, you need to choose one of three courses of action. Now, the thing is that you have to really, if you disagree, just remember that if you disagree, you are setting yourself up for a lengthy term. In other words, you might have to hire a third party. You might have to hire a CPA, a tax attorney, or an EA to kind of help you out. Because if you want to contest the proposed changes, you need to complete and return the response form indicating that you disagree. So you need to provide a signed statement explaining why you disagree, and supply any documentation to support your statement. And you want to send it along with the response form to the IRS address printed on the CP2000. Okay, but you have to act fast though, to not really do not really like delay, because anything is going against you, especially when you have penalties and interest involved here. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about CP2000. Let me show you on the screen here a simple response letter to the IRS CP2000. I'm going to show this on the screen so you have a clear idea. Now, you can see that it's pretty straightforward. You want to put the date, the address of the IRS service center from which you received the notice. You always have that. And then you want to put your name, first name, last name, your address, your phone number, your tax period. So the tax period we are talking about here. So if it's 2020, 21, 22, or whatever, and your taxpayer ID number. So this is actually your social security number. And the tax form we are speaking about here is 1040 for a simple example. It could be 1120 or 1120S, or it could be anything else. And then here is how I want you to read. I'm going to read this with you so you have a clear idea what I'm speaking about. So basically, the reference here is the response to CP2000 notice dated the month, the date, and the year. And then you put to whom it may concern. I received your notice dated this month, day and year, a copy of which is enclosed, as well as completed forms you asked me to provide and return to you by this date. Now, you always have to send back to the IRS the exact Form CP2000 you received from the agency in the first place, so that the agent who is actually looking over your file can have a proper contextualization process in place. And then continuing with the letter, after careful review, I have checked the page, of the notice, indicating that I do not agree with the changes the IRS is proposing. And so this notice indicates that I underreported whatever blah 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 income reported to you via form and issued by this employer, organization, or payer. And however, you want to state the reason why this is incorrect, because you have to be as granular as possible. And so it can be the issuer made a mistake on the form. So you can say, I'm enclosing a copy of this form to show the correct amount. Therefore, I respectfully disagree with the proposed amount and request you to adjust my tax account accordingly. And please do not hesitate to contact me, blah, 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 blah. And you put your information at the bottom. So this is really, really straightforward and helps you actually get a faster answer from the IRS. Now, this is important because if the information the IRS has on file is incorrect, you want to help the agency correct that information, right? So if you suspect there might be a problem with the information that your employer or bank has sent to the IRS, contact the business or person who reported the information to double check. It's all in your favor, because you want to make sure the IRS has the proper information and the most up-to-date information on about your tax situation. So if it turns out that the company sent the IRS the wrong information, you want to ask the representative for a corrected document or a statement to support why it is in error. Then you want to send the IRS a copy with your response, right? Because remember, the burden of proof, the burden is on you here. It's up to you to prove that the IRS is wrong. And so how long would it take the IRS to get back to you? It really depends. So if you disagree with the proposed changes in your in the net CP in the net, if let's say you disagree with the proposed changes in the CP2000 and you send the IRS information supporting your claim, the IRS should take between 30 to 90 days to send you its decision. So it really depends upon the backlog they have at this very specific time during tax season. I'm speaking about the end of January all the way through mid-April. They are pretty busy, but after that they're really like the workload is lighter. And so 30 to 90 days, okay? And please do never ignore a CP2000. Never ignore it, because if you do not respond, the IRS will send you a notice of deficiency and charge you a penalty in addition to any additional taxes or interest you owe as outlined in CP2000. And those penalties, those interest, like that interest can be very steep. You do not want to have that. So it's always better to comply with the law. It's always better to respond to the IRS. It's always better to promptly respond to the IRS and actually ask them any information. At least the thing is, you want to engage with the agency. See, that's the thing. You want to engage with the agency, ask questions, and provide answers. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We are having a conversation about CP2000. The thing you need to understand here is that you will be charged interest on any money you owe anyway. Okay. I mean, if you are able to prove that the IRS is wrong, then they will waive the interest and the penalties for that matter. But that's what I was telling you earlier, that the burden is on you to prove that the agency is wrong. So, but other than that, you will be on the hook for any additional interest you accrue in the process. And so you have 30 days. So once the IRS sends you a CP2000, you have 30 days from the date printed on the letter to send your response to the IRS. Now, keep in mind that you have 30 days to deliver the letter, not to get it in the mail. Okay, it has to be a 30-day delivery. And so the thing here is that the IRS actually over the last few years has not been too wrong, because especially now that everything is electronically monitored, the IRS has a pretty comprehensive system in place to make sure they provide the right information. However, this is a human organization. There are humans who work there, so they could be wrong as well. The machines get it wrong sometimes. But what we have seen based on our research and based on what we have been told by insiders in the industry is that the IRS gets CP2000 wrong 5 to 10% of the time. Okay, 5 to 10%. So there's one chance out of 10 that the IRS is wrong. So when you get a CP2000 from the agency, chances are most of the time they are right. The IRS has the right information. Okay, now a CP2000 notice is automatically generated, so it's not always perfect. Keep that in mind. Okay, there are plenty of stories about taxpayers receiving incorrect CP2000 notices that do not result in extra taxes. It's just that, a CP2000 notice is generated when you have a delta between what one party is telling the IRS and what another party is telling the IRS. But again, it's one of those things where you want to make sure you attend to that matter as soon as possible. When you get a letter from the IRS, you want to respond as soon as possible, and you want to check your own data to make sure everything is actually accurate. Now, there are cases where you might actually have to do a few things, especially if you need to amend your tax return, because if the IRS sends you a CP2000 notice and you realize that the information on that form on that letter, if you will, is correct, you really may have to take some actions. Now, you generally do not need to amend your tax return. It's just better all the time, depending on your tax situation, to speak to a CPA&E or a tax attorney to make sure that you are following the right course of action, whether you should amend or not. So if you choose to file an amended tax return, be sure to include it with your CP2000 response form. And so the IRS websites recommends you writing CP2000 at the top of your return and attaching it behind your completed response. Okay, and it's one of those things where you have to be as transparent as possible. One thing I want to say here is that if through this process, this CP2000 interaction process with the IRS, you realize that you may have made the same mistake in another tax return, you want to file Form 1040X, amended U.S. individual income tax return, to correct it. I mean, and this could apply to several years, by the way. Okay, it's one of those things where, again, it's all about transparency. It's all about being proactive here. And just be aware that there have been in the past some scams and identity theft instances where basically fraudulent CP2000s sent out by scammers impersonating the IRS have become really common in recent years. So sometimes referred to as phishing scams, these are usually sent over mail and include a fake CP2000 attachment. So if you receive an email containing a CP2000 that you suspect might be a fake, you want to forward it to phishing at irs.gov and then delete it from your inbox. We're actually putting this on the screen so you have a clear idea what I'm speaking about. So it's phishing at irs.gov. And in some rare cases, getting a CP2000 might also alert you to the fact that someone else is using your name and social security number. So if you suspect that you might be the victim of identity theft, contact the IRS and your state tax agency. One thing I want to say here is that if after investigation, deliberations, and you realize that the data on your form, on the CP2000 notice is accurate, you might need to actually pay extra to the IRS, right? And the earlier the better, because you want to actually suspend all those taxes, all those additional penalties and interest and so on and so forth. So once you respond to your CP2000, the IRS will send you a new separate tax bill. You can pay it online at irs.gov payments. Okay. Now, if you are unable to pay your full tax bill, you might want to explore a payment agreement with the IRS. So that's option number one. Option number two, you might want to think about a temporary delay in collection. And option number three, you can even have an offer and compromise, which could lower your final tax bill. But in any instances, there's something called reasonable cause. So the IRS will study your application to see whether why you cannot pay the full amount, and they will see whether or not this is the appropriate course of action based on the current law. The bottom line here is that you want to explain as much as possible, and you want to pay as much as possible before requesting some kind of abatement, if you will. Okay, and so if you don't have time to deal with the CP2000 yourself and you have the resources for it, you can just outsource the whole thing to a third party. I mean, that's what I just said earlier. You basically can hire a CPA, an enrolled agent, or a tax attorney to kind of help you out. Now, of course, the amounts we're talking about must be consequential for you to actually hire a third party to help you out. Because if you are only talking about a $100 or $200 or $500 for that matter, it's just better that you take care of it yourself. But if the amounts we're speaking about is in thousands of dollars, then it might make sense to hire a third party to kind of help out in terms of straightening things out with the agency. One thing I want to say here also is that it's one of those things where you can also get something called a Form 2848, Power of Attorney and Declaration of Representative, to allow a tax professional to contact the IRS on your behalf. And this is one of those things where this is one of those documents that could be pretty interesting, pretty helpful, especially if you are busy with other stuff or you're not in the country, for instance, or let's say you want to have professional representation vis-a-vis the IRS to make sure that you are giving the right answers to the agency. So again, but you got to have the resources for it too, though. I mean, it's not something that you can just. It doesn't come cheap, especially if we're talking about thousands of dollars or even hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of the CP2000 notice. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. Let's do a quick recap of today's conversation. So I was just talking to you about CP2000. So I gave you the overview and finally the recap. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember to stay marvelous.